And we're recording. So Eric Norton is due for sentencing in October. Finally, there was a number of warrants issued for him after he failed to appear on charges relating to possession of drugs for sale to supply and one count of burglary. Anyway, Eric Norton has previously been in a lot of tangles.
Yes.
So getting to court and getting him into a position that he's going to be sentenced has been quite the coup, really, for the legal system and everyone else. We're going to start off with a little reminisce about the late Bernard Fogerty and what he wanted to do to Eric Norton.
Trust me, Eric has got one more day to come out and fight like a fucking man! Because he's a fucking faggot! One more day, Eric. One more day I'll give you. If you don't come out and start fighting, watch! Other people are going to start falling victim. You fucking watch! I'm telling you, Eric, come out and fight like a man. Other than that, give it 2 more days, 1 more, and watch. Eric, I'm driving around. I'll give you 1 more day to let me knock the fucking bollocks out of you. You and your friends. I'll fight 5 your friends, right? And I guarantee you, every one of them either have broken jaws or nose or eye sockets. Fucking come out and fucking fight! Like, man, yeah. Like, fucking, man. If I'm driving down, I am gonna fucking murder you when I get you.
So that's Bernard Fogerty. When I say the late, he died in prison. Was it last year he died?
He died last year.
Yeah. He was serving a sentence for the murder of a man called Barry Wolverson along with his friend Robert Rue Redmond. But in the run-up to that, to him being caught and imprisoned, he was beyond chaotic. I mean, he was literally becoming a social media star, and a lot of what he was doing was threats to Eric Norton and his brother Paul.
Yes, that was the focus of this kind of sub-feud. And if you think back to the time, it was a time where what was going on in that part of North Dublin, Coolock, there was this kind of disintegration of probably what was a couple of drug-dealing gangs into this web of really complex, interconnected sort of feuding where people who are at both, had the same allies would also be at war. And Bernard Fogerty...
Some of the feuds and the murders came just at the kind of the tail end of the Kinahan-Hutch feud. And there was slight confusion about whether or not it was something to do with the sort of the vacuum that had been left by the dismantling of the Kinahan organisation. Some people were still trying to sort of wear that banner, that uniform of being Kinahan. They were sort of pushing around a bit and threatening people. So there was a little bit of, it was really, really complex actually trying to explain it.
It was really complex. And of course, Bernard Fogerty and Rue Redmond had worked for the Kinahan cartel, but as guns for hire effectively. But yeah, so the Bernard Fogerty was in the middle of all that chaotic mix. He was probably the most chaotic of it all. And he had grown up right beside the Nortons, so they would have known each other probably all their lives one way or another.
Kilmore in North Dublin.
Yeah, and he was making these threats. I mean, some of them were blazing. You would have thought this is a threat to kill. I mean, you're recording yourself making threats to kill, which is a serious criminal offence. Now, by the time he passed away, he'd amassed a huge amount of convictions, including for murder and various other gun crimes. But, he was calling him out. You've got 1 more day to come out and fight me like a fucking man. 1 more day. If you don't come out and start fighting, watch, other people are going to start falling victim, you fucking rat. Now, you would think that is clearly...
What was the row about? Does anyone actually know?
Well, it was, again, as far as I know, it was one of these rows basically about it's a money and drugs row. So Eric Norton and his brother Paul Norton would have grown up in Kilmore, as I said, but they would have been part of what would become the wider Mr. Big drugs gang. And a lot of people would have come up in that gang as teenagers and then into their 20s who went on to become, I suppose, very well known in the Sunday world. People like Robbie Lawler, who would have grown up with those guys. They would have been sponsored, I suppose, by Pascal Kelly, who was an older criminal who had been involved in Tiger kidnappings. Certainly some of the younger gang members would have begun as Tiger kidnappers, but really Pascal Kelly moved into drugs, and they kind of managed to control that part of North Dublin. There was also people that we can't name, but 2 brothers who ended up in the north of Ireland, very serious criminals who remain under investigation to this day. So the Nortons would have been part of that broader.
But they kind of like, to explain it, I suppose, you had Pascal Kelly, and he sort of mentored the guy we call Mr. Big, who then became a big wholesaler. So his men were essentially his customers, became his customers and became independent operators in their own little fiefdoms.
Yes.
And he's supplying them with weapons and with drugs. But he also retains their loyalty because he's like the overriding boss, essentially.
Yes.
But they are independent. They have their own rows with people. Sometimes he'll wade in to support them. Sometimes he stays back and has nothing to do with it. But the Nortons were, they were there at that particular time that was so incredibly chaotic. And I think I'm talking about from 2019 onwards.
Yeah, 2019 and 2020, I suppose, is when...
2020 is when Robbie Lawler is killed. But then prior to that, in 2019, you had that sort of chaotic feuding that led to the murder of an entire little network nearly under Sean Little.
Yes. And of course, ultimately, the murder of Jordan Davis, which again was sort of maybe categorised within this Coolock feud, along with the murders of Sean Little and Hamid Sanambar.
Now, Jordan Davis was murdered a day or so after Sean Little was shot dead. Sean Little was kind of based in sort of Coolock, Finglas. Yeah. His friend had been murdered in the January, Zach Parker. Confusion over what that was about. He didn't seem to be such a big player, but when you sort of dug into it, you could see that that little network under Sean Little they were riding on the coattails of the Kinahans, and they were sort of being heavy-handed looking for deaths and sort of cementing their turf because they were still using that Kinahan name. There were others who were fed up of that and no longer wanted to be bullied or whatever anymore and kind of went for them. Sean Little is murdered and Jordan Davis is murdered within 24 hours of that. Yeah. He's wheeling his baby in a pram in North Dublin, and it's ultimately Redmond is behind that.
So ultimately Redmond. And
he says he owes him 70,000. But while Bernard Fogerty is being chaotic online, Redmond is also being chaotic and kind of going after his own debts that he believes to be owed to him. And some of them are totally unreasonable demands for money. He is using the phone as well to threaten people, leaving messages for them from his number to theirs. He's shooting into houses. He's pipe bombing people, and he's going for their families.
Yeah. And effectively, while he's working with all these different criminal gangs, both, I think, him and Robbie Lawler to an extent are very similar characters, that they're involved in the drugs trade. They're also involved in the debt collection trade. And they will also take on other people's debts and go and collect them. They link in with all of these gangs, but they, if you were ever to draw up, and everybody's seen them on TV, a gang structure, they're not really in any of those sort of things. They have this reputation for violence that they trade off, and they're both floating around, willing to take these to shoot for very little cause. I mean, if you look at the Jordan Davis. Was it just before he went out to walk his child, he'd left an RIP message for Sean Little, his friend. So there's this complex network of feuds, sub-feuds, connections, allies and enemies, all within the same grouping and all operating in that part of North Dublin.
And obviously those types you're talking about, like Redmond and Lawler, they cannot just keep threatening. No. They have to do something to make the threat real.
Yeah.
For, in other quarters. So if they're demanding money, they can't just keep going, I will do this, I will do this, I will do this.
Yeah.
They actually carry out a murder, and all of a sudden that fear, the terror and the reputation is completely cemented.
Yeah.
And that's how it goes. And it ends up in this really chaotic existence where you can see it's only going to go one way, and that's either a bullet or jail.
Yeah. And of course, any sign of disrespect from other criminals has to be met with this escalation, I suppose. And that's probably what the root of it is with the Norton brothers and Rue Redmond and Bernard Fogerty, that whatever the source of this row, that people like Fogerty, and Fogerty was just as dangerous, even though his videos paint him as being almost comical and he doesn't look like he could really carry out what he's saying. But he was involved in all of these murders and gun attacks with Redmond just as much. So what happens to them is people like that, if somebody disputes a debt or refuses to pay, or they have to escalate all the time. And the Norton brothers both have extensive criminal histories, interesting criminal histories as well.
They did well to survive that period of time and to lay low enough not to kind of hand themselves up on a plate to Fogerty and Redmond, who would have literally taken any opportunity, and did, to murder people that they were threatening.
Yeah, and of course they did have the Mr. Big ultimate, that probably backing of that. Though his backing and his desire to get involved in things like that probably is not that high. You know what I mean? He gets involved in things when they suit him. I mean, we've been writing about the Norton brothers probably since probably for over a decade anyway. I mean, there was a famous incident where Paul Norton was due in court, likely to face a prison sentence, and he couldn't make it to court because he'd been shot. And the guards launched an investigation into this, and they certainly came to believe that it was a self-inflicted gunshot wound in order to avoid going to prison. Certainly that was the belief. He was never ultimately charged in connection with that, but that was one of the first times they started to appear in. And
we should say they're both in their 30s now. Certainly Eric is 32.
Yeah, they're both in the mid-30s. Paul spent a good long time in prison. He did 7 years. I think he got 2 suspended for his role in a getaway driver in a cash and transit robbery. And he has other convictions for robbery and attempted robbery as well. And he famously then ended up in the Special Criminal Court. In one of these, you've always talked about how the Special Criminal Court is not where you want to end up if you're involved in gangland crime. But he was charged in possession with a possession of a loaded firearm. And that had been seized after this high-speed chase. But he ultimately...
Was it thrown from the car?
It was thrown from the car, and Norton had been seen in the car with 2 people. So the case was, the state had said Norton had thrown the firearm out of the car, basically. But the special court acquitted him, saying there was issues with identification and whether it was him who had dropped the gun. So obviously the sort of broad case is, well, how do you know it was him? How could you see it was him? You're chasing a car, the other people in the car might not have known there was a gun involved, all of this sort of stuff.
That might work with a reasonable doubt in front of a jury, but is unlikely, are you going to tell me, to work in the Special Criminal Court?
Well, it did work.
It did work.
He was acquitted, and Mr. Justice Tony Hunt said it was far more likely that the firearm and ammunition were in possession of one of the 2 other men. And that came down to how the Gardaí could identify who was sitting here. But he also said...
Which window it came out of.
Yes.
And dumped.
Yes, yeah. And he said, but Mr. Justice Tony Hunt said it's not an endorsement of the activities on the night. So that was Paul Norton. Yeah, he supposed to make a little bit of legal history when you come out of the Special Criminal Court, a free man.
He's with a few, really, in the...
Yeah.
So Eric Norton, he's due for sentencing in October for a start, but he has a lot of previous convictions, violent stuff, as well as sort of drugs, etc. Vicious attack on an elderly taxi driver is one.
And that came back to haunt him as well in another sort of unusual way, in that he got convicted of that. I don't think he basically pulled a taxi driver in his 70s out of the car and drove off in it. And he was ultimately convicted of it. But it came back to haunt him when he brought a compo claim to the court. And he'd been asked, you had to reveal if you'd been involved in any sort of previous incidents with a car accidents, and he failed
He said no.
He said no, so he had a 60,000 euro personal injury claim over a car crash thrown out after he told the judge he hadn't been involved in any other car crashes, despite being convicted over the carjacking incident, which ended with him crashing the car following a high-speed chase. So that came back to haunt him in more ways than one.
So where are the Nortons now in the greater scheme of things? Obviously, Eric Norton is facing a hefty enough prison term, you would imagine. He'll know in October what that is. And we might hear some evidence around the charges that were levelled at him. And we might hear some evidence around his own background and growing up and whatever he decides to put to the court. But where are they now, and where are all those characters that we've spoken about? Rue Redmond is in jail.
Yeah.
Double life sentence.
Yeah.
Fogerty is dead.
Yeah.
The little gang are completely depleted. Whatever is left of them are probably independent operators.
Yeah.
So where are the Nortons, and have they been really since that whole explosion of violence calmed down for various reasons?
Well, I think they're not at the centre of the Mr. Big Gang. I mean, there is a core grouping there that operate. Some of them come from that part of Dublin, but from other parts of Dublin as well. I think the Mr. Big Gang has gone far more nationwide than they would have been as the Nortons were coming up 10 years ago. Certainly, you can see that that gang expanded. It became one of the main wholesalers of drugs throughout the country. Certainly grew as the Kinahans took a lesser role in that sort of the what happened within Ireland. And they're far more of a nationwide outfit. But
pushed right over the border.
Huge
supply chain over the border.
And probably are as focused on the rural drug trade, the northern drug trade, as they are the trade in that part of North Dublin. Now, there are groups of younger criminals as well who've emerged in that area that are keeping the feuding to a minimum. So I would say the Nortons are far from where they were.
We've spoken before about criminals, especially sort of chaotic, violent criminals with all the convictions that both these brothers have. They've been targeted a number of times in threats to their own lives. They've hit their 30s.
Yeah.
We talk about people running out of steam.
And they do. And of course, people start to amass convictions as well, which can happen that, as a younger person, you're going to get a couple of convictions, you're going to get a couple of chances, you're not going to get lengthy prison sentences. But as you start getting older, they start amassing. They get rolled into one, you might dodge this, which of course, Eric Norton missed a large number of his court appearances, and his defence barrister did say he'd been in treatment.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That's why he missed the court appearances.
That was said in court. But there
was no
no
doubt there'll probably be more information around that when you come to sentencing.
Yeah, but there was bench warrants issued and all of that. So, which is, if people can provide proper medical notes, sometimes that doesn't happen. So you start to amass these convictions, and then you start to get longer prison sentences because you've had previous prison sentences, and it starts getting held against you. So there's guys in their 30s. A lot of serious criminals run out of steam. I mean, it's a statistical fact, fascinating study about bank robbers, like the high level, most dangerous bank robbers running out of steam. There was this study done, I'll have to dig it out. But basically it said the vast majority of them run out of, these are guys who are shooting at police. And it was mostly guys from in the 1980s who were operating that were studied. And the vast majority of them, by the time they hit their mid-40s, were alcoholics, home alcoholics, drinking, 10 cans a day in their house and not getting involved in serious or violent crime. But then there's the other type, and that's the Mr. Big type who go into the other direction. And
you dig that study out, and I'll dig out a very interesting chapter from Freakonomics.
Okay.
About how much drug dealers are actually making.
Yes, okay.
Why they still live with their mothers.
Exactly. And I mean, I've actually read bits of that as well, which is fascinating. And it goes to the motivations of why people commit crime. And, probably what we should do about crime. Because people do, if people are in addiction, that follows a certain path as well. where the road gets narrower, I suppose, as you get older. But yeah, it's
in the normal world, you may choose the wrong career early on, and probably by your 30s or your 40s, you can have a big career change, but you're not going to, you're actually able to get out of your work environment without getting killed or dragged back into it.
Exactly.
So people can, so it's possibly the same throughout society, that people coming up to their 30s and 40s, that everything changes for them.
It is, but there's other studies which I'll dig out now that we're talking about it, about the peak level of violence committed by young men, which is really about 27, 28. That is the age at which they're, they're talking about extreme violence, but people will see it with guys that they grew up with who were 18, 19 and were getting fights in pubs. But that all stops at some point, doesn't it?
I remember having some statistics before about that age group, and it was also the most likely, certainly in Ireland, and it wasn't a very, clinical study, but it was the most likely age to get murdered during feuding.
Yeah. So actually, sorry, I think 28 is the age at which things are changing, but there's a peak in the mid-20s. And after that, without intervention or anything, people tend not to be committing these really reckless acts of violence. But what you do have is a few that we used to call sociopaths or whatever.
Yeah.
The Mr. Big type who just keep going and start to become the management of that. And they are, by their nature, more manipulative and less, tend not to be concerned about other people, really. Do you know?
Well, let's dig all that out, because you can have so much fun with all your diagnosing people with personality disorders and all the rest of it.
All my other, but it's great. It's really interesting. The violence thing is really, really interesting. And, it's obviously young men who commit violence. I mean, in all societies at all times, young men commit violence, but they don't continue to do it to the, I mean, some do, but it's only really a handful.
Okay, interesting. And so that's Eric Norton for sentence in October. I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.